You've been taking a look at Ashburn, Virginia, and you're probably pretty curious about what it costs to live here. Well, I've been here for the past 20 years, and let me tell you, it has definitely changed a lot in that time frame. But I'm going to break down exactly what it costs to live here, so stay tuned. Hey everyone, Stephanie Callahan here, broker and co-owner of 15 West Homes, located right here in Northern Virginia. If this is your first time to our channel and you want to know everything there is to know about living, eating, sleeping, working, playing in the Northern Virginia area, be sure you click that subscribe button and don't forget to hit the little bell so that you're notified every time we add a new video to our channel. Today, I'm going to dive into the cost of living in Ashburn, Virginia. So let's get started. As I mentioned, I've been in Ashburn for the past 20 years. I've had the opportunity to see how prices have changed over that time frame. Personally, I have always felt like Ashburn was a pretty expensive place to live, but I never sat down and looked at the numbers until now, so that you don't have to. And I'm going to really dig into the costs here in Ashburn compared to our national averages and look into things like housing, healthcare, transportation, and more. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, because it's not all pretty, so that you have a really good sense of the cost of living here in Ashburn. Let's get to it. Ashburn is located in the eastern part of Loudoun County, which has been ranked as the richest county in the United States based on household median income. So it stands to reason that it would cost more to live here just based on the fact that there's a higher level of income here. Keep in mind also that Northern Virginia in general is more expensive than the rest of the US. And that has been primarily driven by our housing costs, especially in the past few years. One other thing to note about that is that our area does not tend to follow the national trends when it comes to the housing market. There's more stability here. Home values don't tend to fluctuate as much. And the good part about that is, home values are maintained, they grow pretty consistently. But the bad part is it can be expensive to get into a home, especially if you're a first-time home buyer. And as a result, we also sometimes have higher property taxes. So all of that contributes to a higher housing cost for us here in the Northern Virginia area. There are different data sources, and the data varies slightly, but in the end, they're all saying the same thing, and that is Ashburn isn't cheap. Depending on what data source you're looking at, Ashburn's cost of living index comes in somewhere between 144 and 150. And what that means is that it costs 44 to 50% more to live in Ashburn than it does to live in the average US town. That might sound pretty bad, but honestly, there are definitely some positives to consider along with the negatives. I'm going to talk about the overall cost of living, but also break it down into the factors that contribute to that overall cost. For the purpose of our analysis today, we're going to assume that the average cost in the US is 100. So let's get to the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's get started with the good. Ashburn offers a pretty high quality of life. Out of 2,202 areas that were ranked, Ashburn came in 223rd, so that's pretty good. Ashburn is home to a lot of really wonderful communities that offer a wide range of amenities that tend to include pools, tennis, basketball courts, walking trails. There are also so many parks and recreation areas throughout the Ashburn area. We have very highly rated schools, some vibrant town centers that offer dining and shopping all in one, and we have really good access to the metro from a commuting standpoint. So there are a lot of good things about living here in the Ashburn area. In fact, Ashburn has been ranked as one of the best places to live in the United States. Back in 2021, Money Magazine ranked Ashburn as the 5th best place to live in the US. Unfortunately, we've fallen out of the top 50 since then, but I believe that is largely due to our increase in housing costs, because we still enjoy all the same attributes related to economic opportunity, unemployment, amenities in the area that we had when we had initially made the list. So if we could do something about that housing cost, we might be able to get back on the list of best places to live. Another good thing about Ashburn is that we tend to have a pretty high median income, which is right around $139,000 a year. That is about 71% higher than the median income for all of Virginia, which is around $80,000 a year. In Ashburn, we are surrounded by high-tech, government, education, and healthcare industries. So there are lots of job opportunities if you work in one of those disciplines. Okay, so let's actually start talking about some of the costs here in Ashburn that still fall in this good category. The first one we're going to talk about is chicken. It's what's for dinner for a lot of people I know, except for my business partner, Maggie. So I think it's a pretty relevant metric as we start to break down the overall cost of living here in Ashburn. It turns out that the cost of chicken here in Ashburn is about 6% less than the national average. So if that's not a reason to move to Ashburn, I really don't know what is. Also in the good category is the cost of utilities. If you've seen some of my other videos, you've heard that Ashburn is also known as the data center capital of the world. And part of the reason that all of those data centers decided to locate here is because our cost of electricity is lower than the national average. So that's a benefit. We also have a lot of homes that use natural gas for heating, hot water, and cooking. And natural gas tends to be a less expensive fuel as well. So overall, utility bills tend to be a little bit more affordable, just under the national average here in Ashburn. The next cost that I want to share with you is about healthcare. So in Ashburn, our healthcare expenses run about 13% less than the national average and about 6% less than the average across all of Virginia. While we don't have any hospitals located right here within Ashburn, we are so close to wonderful medical facilities all over the Northern Virginia, DC metro area. There are lots of specialists and you can really access all kinds of care pretty easily. And I think that really helps keep those healthcare prices down. Okay, it's time to move on. You know that the cost of living here in Ashburn is a good bit higher than the national average. So it's time to talk about some of those costs that fall into the bad category. And the first one we're going to talk about is groceries. So while chicken might be less expensive than the national average, your overall grocery bill is going to run around 11% higher than the national average. Now, we do have some great grocery stores right here in Ashburn. We have Harris Teeter, we have Giant, we have Whole Foods and Trader Joe's. If you go a few miles outside of Ashburn, you can get to Wegmans, which is my personal favorite. We also have Costco and Sam's Club and a Super Walmart. So if you're smart about how you do your shopping, you might be able to reduce that grocery bill a little bit. Next up in the bad category of costs in Ashburn is daycare. If you need daycare, there are about 20 childcare centers located just within Ashburn, and that doesn't include the in-home daycare providers. That might seem like a lot, but if you recall, Ashburn is a very family-focused area, and that means lots and lots of kids. It is also an expensive area, so that means a lot of two-income households, which drives up that demand for daycare. So be sure, before you make a move to Ashburn, that you really evaluate all of your options and check out those wait lists. They can be quite long, particularly at the younger age groups. I have friends that have gotten on a daycare wait list within months of finding out that they were pregnant. Okay, so it can take quite a while to get a slot at the center that you want your kid to be at. Also, keep in mind that daycare costs here, the average cost for one child is just under $1,500 a month, and that is about 37% higher than the national average. So the minute you start adding a second or a third child in daycare, you are quickly reaching, probably your mortgage payment or even beyond. That was definitely true for us when we had young children, my daycare cost was more than my mortgage. And we finally decided to switch up and go with an au pair situation to help offset that. And that was a wonderful solution. So keep that in mind as well. Also keep in mind that at a certain point, it may not financially make sense for both parents to work outside the home and pay for daycare. It might be more cost effective for one parent to stay home with the kids rather than paying for daycare at that point. So keep that in mind. It is quite pricey here in the Ashburn area. Next up on our list of bad costs in Ashburn is the cost of transportation. We actually pay probably about 5% less than the national average for gasoline. So you might wonder, why would transportation be in the bad category? Well, particularly prior to COVID, a lot of people that live in Ashburn commute in towards DC, whether it's Reston, Tyson's Corner, Washington, DC, some folks into Maryland. And usually, that could be 10, 20, 40 miles one way. So you have people sometimes commuting 80 miles or more round trip every single day. And that's a lot of gasoline. We have to take into account car maintenance and repairs, insurance on top of that. And we also need to consider the cost of mass transportation. So we have really nice access to Metro now, but it's certainly not cheap, right? But it's a nice alternative to driving. But when you look at all of those things in aggregate, that makes our transportation costs 13 to 26% higher than the national average. Now it's time to move on to the ugly. As I mentioned before, housing costs are the largest factor driving our high cost of living here in Ashburn, coming in at 120% higher than the national average. That means based on that national index of 100, Ashburn's housing cost is at 228. Let's start by talking about the cost of renting a home here in Ashburn. Across the board, the cost to rent will be higher than the national average. For example, if you're looking for a 4-bedroom property, it's going to cost you upward of $3,000 a month, which is about 43% higher than the national average. You may have heard a lot in the news about the crazy housing market when we're talking about resale properties, how buyers are offering more than list price and waiving all their contingencies to beat out other bidders. Well, we have seen something similar to that in the rental market as well. There has been competition and folks have started offering more than the listed rent price, and that has definitely driven prices up here. Another factor that we need to consider when we're looking at costs that fall in this ugly category is the cost to purchase a home in Ashburn. Our median home price is right around $772,000, which is just about double the median home price for the US as a whole, which is $338,000. Ashburn is clearly a high demand area for housing, and that has continued to drive our prices up. We have had ongoing development for the past 20 to 30 years with new neighborhoods being built, but demand has continued to outpace supply, and those prices just continue to rise. So if we take a look back at the past 10 years, we can see that home prices have just about doubled in that time frame. So if you purchased a home, 10 years ago or more, you made a great investment. And when you go to sell, you're going to get a great return on that purchase. But if you're trying to get into a home now, that does make it somewhat challenging, particularly if you're a first-time home buyer. One other thing to keep in mind about the housing prices here in Ashburn, although they are high, they tend to be a little bit more affordable than areas closer into DC. That's just a trend all over the Northern Virginia area. The further you go out from DC, homes get a little bit more affordable than they are what you see closer into the city. The other benefit of being out here is that even though some of these homes are 20 going on 30 years old, they are relatively newer than homes closer to DC. So less updates, fewer repairs, those types of expenses associated with some of the homes out here. Okay, so if we put together the good, the bad, and the ugly, unfortunately, we still come back to the fact that Ashburn is a very expensive place to live. In fact, it's in the top 8% of the most expensive cities in the world to live. If that hasn't swayed you and you're still interested in moving to Ashburn or anywhere in the Northern Virginia area, we would love to help you with that transition. Please give us a call, shoot us an email, write us a text. Days, nights, and weekends, we've got your back when it comes to moving to Northern Virginia.